So yeah, we determined that we definitely going to go into schooling. We're going to be spending north of 300,000 plus over 13 years. And now it's like, all right, Billy, where am I going to start putting my money? So how do we work that back, or how would you plan that for a client?
If you don't plan ahead financially for this and school fees are starting next year, you're just going to have to fit it into your budget. But if you plan 5-10 years in advance, you can start setting aside money and investing the money and getting a return on the money, so you actually get some compounding on those funds before school even starts, which will give you, a massive advantage compared to if you just tried to pay the fees as they come up.
Yeah.
A lot of people will automatically just save in cash, like in a savings account.
Yep.
But as we know, if you're
Welcome back to the Winners Playbook. Josh here with Billy. School fees, uniforms, sport, and trips add up fast. So today we're going to be breaking down a simple system so education costs do not run the show. And before we get into that, I'll just recap on what's been happening during the week. Billy, what's news on your end, mate?
Well, I'm home alone. My whole family has gone to Brisbane for 7 days.
Wow.
Because my wife's from Brisbane, so doing family stuff and entertaining the kids for school holidays.
Yeah.
So I'm stuck here working, but it's nice having a quiet house, I can tell you. Like I'm getting all these flashbacks to when I was single in my 20s. I went down to I thought I don't want to just like do Uber Eats all week. Right?
Yeah.
But I only have to meal plan for one person, which is quite refreshing. So
yeah,
we down to the IGA on Monday night, bought the bachelor's handbag, the barbecue chicken. The little meal plan for the week.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's actually sort of a nice way to start the year with a bit of quiet.
Yeah, that's the dream for a lot of people, isn't it? Just a bit of a break and, no kids around and just, a bit of your own time.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously, the older they get, the more you miss them. So like I really miss them. But
yeah,
it's good for the mind, a bit of peace and quiet, and get home from work and you're not doing, dinner, showers, bedtimes, arguments, all that stuff is just nice and quiet. Just me and the dog here, so that's what's happening for me.
You'll take it. What about the weekend then? What have you got? Any major moves on the weekend?
Yeah, so during the week I didn't do anything. Just went to work. Just got home, watched YouTube, glass of red. Mm-hmm. Tomorrow I am going to catch up with some mates and go for a bit of a walk down at Mornington Peninsula.
Nice.
And then potentially catch up with my brother in the afternoon in the city. So that's where all the action will happen tomorrow.
Nice. That sounds pretty refreshing.
Yeah. How about yourself?
I don't have a quiet week with no family, that's for sure. But got some travel coming up where I'll probably, I suppose, have a bit of that, but not be a bit chaotic, I would say. But we're obviously a couple of weeks in. What's news? We've been a pretty busy week. We've been doing some interviews in the business, which has been good. So we're going to be having some new staff join because Forever's sort of expanding there. So that's a positive. But it's been a busy week with a lot of internal stuff. Going over to Perth next Friday, so got the week over there for Australia Day weekend, which will be cool. So we got a couple of days in Perth, and then we fly in and then we go straight to Margaret River, which I think is about a 3-hour drive from Perth. And then we'll be down there for, I think, 5 days. And then we'll come back up to Perth for a couple of nights. And then we fly back out. But we've at least got the in-laws there. So my wife's parents, so we can get a bit of a chop out and, offload Leon for a few hours every now and then and do a few things.
You need that.
Yeah, we didn't really get much of a chance over the break to do much of that. And I've been wanting to get through the annual planning with Alana that I like to do every year. So I've sort of done my part of it, but I haven't had her do her section of it yet. So I want to catch a few hours sometime, probably late next week and do that. But there's obviously some amazing places to go see in Perth. I've never been over there. We was chatting the other day. There's some good wineries and things. And so I'm looking forward to that. The weather looks pretty good, pretty stable, just I think like a flat 30 every day. So that will be nice, not too hot. Other than that, we've just been sort of planning out some big things for 2026. And, we were sort of talking yesterday about some of the podcast plans and big things coming that way. But things are all happening. It's moving quick. But no complaints on my side of things at all. And yeah, today talking school fees and everything there and in between. So it's obviously a very relevant conversation for a lot of Australians. And you can obviously go through the schooling system and pay not a great deal, or you can go through and pay a hell of a lot of money at the same time. And yeah, it's been interesting. I'm talking from my own personal perspective of what I've seen with clients over the years, like, and you know, from my own personal journey, like the school you go to doesn't necessarily define, you know, who you're going to be or the opportunities you're going to have. However, I do feel in some situations you can give your kids a better possible opportunity of success and whatever that means, depending upon the school that they go to, because I think it's a lot of who you hang around, and that's just talking on my own personal experience. But yeah, what's your view on that one, Billy? With schools, you obviously got a couple of kids in school and things, and I went public. I was public school the whole way through myself, and went to a school that no one would ever know about. So yeah, what's your view on that, and what have you seen with clients over the journey? Because I've seen a couple of clients that have had their kids in top schools, and then the kids have gotten through to year 12 and dropped out and become a tradie at that point. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just I know the parents were actually extremely disappointed because I spoke to them about it, and they just paid all of this money, and the kid's like, screw this, I want to be a tradie. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Yeah, my thoughts on that have evolved over time. I do think, generally speaking, private school is worth it if you can do it without putting yourself under big financial stress.
Yeah.
You know, I went to a private school. My wife went to a private school. I used to think, like, similar to what you said, does it really matter? Like, a lot of my friends from private school ended up in trades.
Yeah.
But when I reflect back, on average of the group I went through school with, like, a lot of them ended up with really good careers, good businesses.
Yeah.
All that stuff, even if they were in trades, just because I think the education does help you. And obviously just the people we've talked about this a lot, the people you surround yourself with. So if you're fortunate enough to be able to go to a nice school, there's a good chance to be surrounded with more positive influence, I think.
Yeah.
But you know, as you've noted, for some kids, or like yourself, it doesn't matter what school you go to, you're gonna make something happen.
Yeah.
But I feel like on average, private school, it does give you a big advantage, I think.
I think it's like, yeah, I when I talk to clients about it, like we'll put Leon through private, and yeah, I think it's just you're stacking more of the odds in your favor of a chance of them, you know, getting a better career or having better people around them. Because I think that's the biggest thing I see it is just who you're going to get around you. And yeah, for sure, you're still going to get shitheads in private school, and that you can't avoid that whatsoever. But I think you're just stacking more of the odds in your favor. But at the same time, then you know, you're going to get some you know, rippers come through the public school system at the same time. But it does really come down to your financial position, because then when you look at the true costs of going to some of those schools, which we're going to break down some of those figures, I see some clients where, yeah, I actually, they're really sacrificing to send their kids through to school. It's like looking at the after-tax spend, you know, we were just talking before we went live here, like, you know, some of the top schools are 50K plus a year, and that's after tax dollars. So if you're in the highest tax bracket, you're basically earning $100,000 to pay out that 50K. It's a lot of money. So yeah,
and then make it 2 kids or 3 kids, and then it's eye-watering. The costs are just absolutely eye-watering.
Yeah. You look at that, and then you look at the, you know, average earnings and wages in Australia. It's like it's not really feasible. But some people, make those sacrifices, and you know, some of what we're going to be talking about today. So if we start with building up the yearly education budget, and you know, how you go about doing that. Like if you have clients that are talking about these things and sending their kids to private schools, and got to make, you know, kind of like me, got Leon, and we're going to have a couple of other kids, and we're thinking about it. What's your sort of approach and starting point when clients mention that, and how we start to think about the planning of it?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we start with, like, what is the cost? There's just a huge range, right? Like if you go to a public school and you just pay for bare minimum, you can get away with a couple of grand a year, right, in costs. Versus if you go to a high-end school and then there's camps, extracurricular activities, the canteen's more expensive. You're surrounded by people with money. You get caught in that light. You got to live near the school too. Like that's a huge, that's something that's underestimated. To be in a nice school, you might have to live in an expensive postcode. So when you factor all that in, you're looking at it can be well over 50 grand a year, right? For one child.
Yeah.
And then you add 2 or 3 into the mix. It's huge. So understanding those costs is the first step, and whether it's actually possible for you when you factor in you've got a mortgage and all the other costs of living as well. That's probably the first step. And then, the key thing is you really need to plan in advance for this. You can't, if you enroll your kid in private school and don't even think about it, and then that first year of fees kicks in, unless you're on a very, very high income, it's just going to be crippling.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen a couple of clients where they're higher income and kids are going to go to private school, but they're also right now paying a hell of a lot in childcare fees because they're getting minimal to no rebate or discount whatsoever on that side of things. And, they're paying north of 30 grand a year on childcare fees with all of the kids. And so they're kind of looking at it like that when schooling then starts, while childcare obviously drops off. So they're kind of in the habit of already paying a fair bit of money out towards, the kids from that perspective. So there's a lot of different ways to think about the planning. But talking a bit about those numbers, there was a study that a group put out called Futurity, and they actually they have these investment products for kids' education or investing for the kids actually into the future. They're one of the only ones in Australia that do this sort of stuff. But they put out a nice study that looked over the average costs across Australia over the 13-year period from, say, prep through to year 12. And again, this is just going off the averages. But if you take Victoria, where we are, you're looking at for metro about 115,000 over the 13 years. For regional,
public school, isn't it?
Public, yeah. So public, yeah. Public, yeah. That's no, we're not at private yet. Regionals about 77 over the 13 years. And you got Catholic metro is about 200 grand. Regional about 150. And then you're getting into the private, so the independent schools, about nearly 400, close to $400,000. So you're at about 30K a year there. And you got the regionals at about 250 in private. But, I think that's, again, you're looking at averages there. So the average private school at about 30, that's pretty fair. But then we were saying before, you can get schools well above the 50 at the same time. But still, $30,000 a year for a lot of people in Australia it's going to be a lot of money. And then you times that out over 3 kids, we're talking north of $1 million. So it's a huge investment from that perspective when you start to break it down. But I think with the planning out, like you said, Billy, it's really the earlier you start, the better off you're going to be for any of this stuff. So if we start getting into, then we want to send our kids to a nice school. We're loosely looking at it's going to cost 20 or 30K or maybe upwards of $50,000 a year, and we're looking down the barrel of $500,000 plus from prep through to year 12 and beyond. What are the next steps then around what are my options basically? What are we starting to think about, and where would we start putting money?
Yeah, so I think the key thing for me is it's very rare for people to be able to pay those level of school fees just from their salary as it comes in.
Yeah.
Right. Unless they own a business or they got very high income, the cash flow is very rare that you're going to cover it on cash flow alone.
Yeah.
So you need to plan ahead in the sense that you probably need a lump sum or an asset that you can draw down on when those school fees peak, especially if you've got more than one child. If they're both concurrently in high school and it's $100 grand a year for a few years or something like that. You want to be able to pull that from a pool of money or assets, not just out of your salary each month.
Yeah.
That's where the planning ahead starts, is ideally building up an asset, whether it's cash, investments, whatever, a liquid asset that you build up, and then when school fees are peaking, you can draw back down on that.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of the planning comes into it. And probably the other component is not neglecting the rest of your financial plan just for school fees. Because we've all seen it, right? The families where kids go to private school, they buy a house, big mortgage, kids get to 18, 20 years old, parents are 50, And then they realize they're actually in a pretty poor financial position. And now we're rushing to try and build some sort of future retirement plan because they've just neglected themselves and made it all about the kids.
Mhm.
Kids are growing up, kids have left the house, and now they're like, shit, now what do we do? They've still got a big mortgage and not enough super. So making sure you're addressing all those other things as well, not just the school fees.
Yeah, well, that's a point I was going to raise a little bit later, and I was going to see what your opinion was because I wrote a couple of notes before, and I was going to say, here's an uncomfortable truth worth hearing. Keen for your perspective on this one, Billy. So, a financially secure, present, low-stress household beats an elite school funded by anxiety and undersaving. Kids benefit more from parents who aren't stressed about money, stability, and the optionality later. So, help with the first home, travel, business, or uni, rather than the most expensive logo on the blazer. Well, what do you think?
Is that a Josh Lee quote or a ChatGPT quote?
Mix. That's a mix of both. That's a mix of both. Inspired by ChatGPT, but but I think there's so much truth to be said in that. Where
Absolutely.
if you're sending your, I see it so much, like with people sending their kids to schools, like keeping up with the Joneses is like massive in that space. Like in that when you're starting to get into certain circles and. Yeah, like the stresses of sending them there, and then you're working your absolute butt off in your job or your business or whatever, and you're probably not satisfied and you're stressed out, and what's the effect of that stress on your longevity? That's a totally different conversation in the health, and then the cascading effect of that probably means you make poorer decisions in your everyday life, and then you get home and your kid comes home from school, but you're just like smashed, you're out of energy, you've got no juice left in the tank, you can't be present, you're distracted, or you're always on your phone because you're trying to do a million things an hour because you've got an incredibly demanding job or a boss that's like always on your back because you wanted the extra income. Yeah, I don't know. Is that what most people would want? I don't think so, but I think it's what a lot of people do.
Yes. No, you're spot on. The most important thing for the kids is that their parents are present and happy and positive. And if you're killing yourself to cover these school fees and one of you staying back at work till after dinner every night and that sort of stuff, then is it worth it? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. Because you could go, and obviously within the world of public schools, there's better one. There's, a range of quality of schools there. So you can make sure you're in a zone for a good public school. And instead of forking out $80K a year in school fees, you can take your family on more holidays, you can go overseas, you can get private tutors, you can do loads of extracurricular things. And that'll cost, less than half of what you would have been paying in private school fees. So that's, that's definitely a good alternative. The other thing I think it's worth mentioning is it needs to suit the individual child. And we've seen it all with clients a lot where they send both their kids to a particular school, and then for one of the children, it's just not a good school for them.
Yeah.
And they end up moving anyway. So to an extent, you want to be, in my view, you want to be flexible around which schools your kids are going to and make sure it's actually a good match for them and a good experience for them, whether it's public or private.
Yeah. Yeah, the zoning's an interesting one because again, we haven't started looking hard at schools yet, but I'm aware that a lot of people start trying to put deposits down on schools like way into or ahead of time, so they can try and get their kids into certain schools. And then the zoning's the interesting one because the zoning's that's relevant for the publics, but then if you're private, you can just pay, assuming there's spots to get in. Yeah, but there are some great public schools, aren't there, and particularly in Victoria.
Yeah, can I tell you something about this you might find interesting?
Yeah.
Because we're looking into private schools for our kids for high school, which we may or may not do. Depends on a number of factors, of course. But there's waiting lists, so you do need to talk about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
We were put in touch with a consultant, and all he does is get your kids into the elite private schools.
Consultant costs. Can you give us an idea?
Thousands.
Really?
Yeah, so you pay this guy several $1,000s,
and he hunts,
and he's like connected with all the people at the private schools, seriously. So they like assess your child, go through questionnaires, figure out what schools are a good fit for them, and then he has methods to give you a much better chance of getting in compared to if you just put your name on the waiting list with everyone else.
No kidding. Wow. So he's kind of like a buyer's agent of the schools, kind of, in a way. He's doing the, sourcing and getting in and trying to get you a better deal than you probably could yourself.
And I thought it sounded like a scam, but I had a meeting with him.
Yeah.
I grilled him on it, and I'm like, it actually sounds legit, because I
can see how that's
doing that. Like, there's a waiting list, and he said, well,
Yeah.
the schools vet kids before they come in, but because they all know me and I've worked with them for years, they know that when I send them a child, they're already pre-vetted.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, geez, sounds like he's carved out a pretty good niche, and I can see how that's probably a good position. He's probably built a good business model out of it, because a lot of people sending to those more expensive schools will be time poor and be like, hey, pay X amount, whatever it's going to be, 5 or 10 grand, or I don't know how that works, but find me the school and get me in. And yeah, I can see that.
You can put your name on all these waiting lists, which costs money, and then you can find out, too bad you're not getting into any of those schools because they're too much demand.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've got him on the list for a future podcast guest, this guy.
Yeah. No, that'd be an
interesting
one.
Stories.
He does some awesome stories. Yeah, for sure. No, that's cool. That's good information. Good information to know. All right. What about we go back to, so yeah, we determined that we definitely going to go into schooling. We're going to be spending north of 300,000 plus over 13 years. And now it's like, all right, Billy, where am I going to start putting my money? So how do we work that back, or how would you plan that for a client?
Yeah. So if you don't plan ahead financially for this, and school fees are starting next year, you're just going to have to fit it into your budget.
Correct.
Right? But if you plan 5-10 years in advance, you can start setting aside money and investing the money and getting a return on the money. So you actually get some compounding on those funds before school even starts, which will give you, a massive advantage compared to if you just tried to pay the fees as they come up.
Yeah.
A lot of people will automatically just save in cash, like in a savings account.
Yep.
But as we know, if your investment time frame is longer than 5 years, it makes sense to invest, like not just in cash, like invest in stocks or other investments.
Yeah.
If you've got at least 5 years, you've got some time for compounding to occur. And if you've got 10 plus years, you can really build up a sizable asset if you're sending cash into that portfolio every month.
Yeah.
I did just brought out the old compound interest calculator.
Yeah.
So this is okay. You're investing $3,000 per month for 10 years, with an average return of 8% a year. You've got more than $500,000.
There it is.
So that's what we will do if we have clients that have, say, 2 kids, first child starting private school in 8 years, 10 years. We will do that. They'll get there. By the time the first child starts, they've got $500,000 in an asset. They're used to putting in $3,000 a month already. So they can pretty much pay for that first child just from cash flow. So they stop investing. They start paying the school fees of the first child. Second child hits school, then they start drawing down on the portfolio to cover any shortfall.
Yeah, and that's like probably the most perfect and optimal way to plan it out if we can do it in that sort of a fashion. So I think that really hits the nail right on the head. And I've had some clients in the last couple of years where it's pretty much been exactly that. But they've had a couple of some older kids, some young kids at the same time. So the older ones, like you said, we opened an investment account because we've got like a 10-year time horizon or close to. But then we've got the older kids who are going to be in school in a couple of years, and that's where we've opted for either a savings or an offset account because we don't want any risk of that money whatsoever. And then we're just going to fund it from cash flow basically when the time ultimately comes. So I think that's a perfect way of doing it. And there is a free calculator on Money Smart. I forget the name of it, but there's a calculator on there where you can say how much you want to save up by what date, and then it will tell you, depending upon the return that you're going to get on your money, what you need to invest per month to basically get that back, to get that figure. And that's a lot of what we do with our clients. Like, how much do we need? Then we reverse engineer back how much you should be investing. But like you said, you don't necessarily need to build it up to have all of it to then pay, because you don't just pay 13 years generally in a lump sum. You're just going to be paying it year to year anyway. So you can still leave the investment to be compounding over that time, pay some out of cash flow, and then to start drawing out on that investment.
And if things go well, you may not even end up drawing out of that fund. If your career goes well and and you've got a good budgeting system in place, and you may end up not having to spend that money on school fees and still have it there when the kids are older, and you might help them with a house deposit or do something else with that money. So you got nothing to lose.
Legitimately exactly what I've done, and always such a big fan of like practice what you preach. And so all of these things, like I set up an investment account as soon as Leon was born, and exactly what I am doing with the view that, hey, maybe we will use it for some schooling expenses, or no, we'll just hold it until he's 18 and give him a big lump sum of money at that point in time. But it just gives you optionality at least. So it ultimately is there, or we could just keep the investment for ourselves if we wanted to, because some of these investments are really flexible in terms of how they can be structured. And we'll touch a bit on that, I think, in a moment with investment bonds and how they work. But yeah, I think a lot of people do overlook actually investing for these things as opposed to the standard savings account, or just hoarding money in cash, which I think is naturally a bad idea, because you're not actually getting any return on cash whatsoever.
No, and you tax on the interest too, right? So it's you're not even going to beat inflation. Like, your money's going to lose value over time.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation the other day. I wouldn't mind just talking about it quickly, because I had someone say, cash is king, like actual cash, like hoarding cash, not just cash on the savings account. And I'm like, okay, let's break down your rationale there. So let's say you've got $1 million in cash, and in actual cash. I don't know anyone that's got that, but anyway, assume you do. You pull it out, you've got it sitting in cash under your bed, wherever it is, buried in the backyard. So that $1 million is just $1 million. Whereas if you keep it in just a general savings account, let's just assume you're getting 4% on that, just for simplicity here. Because this person was like, oh, I'm going to get taxed on the money, but if it's in cash, I'm not getting taxed on it. I was like, okay, hear me out. You've got your $1 million. Let's just assume you get a 4% return on that savings account. So you've earned $40,000 of interest over the year. Worst case scenario, you're in the highest tax bracket. You're taxed at 47%. So on that $40K of interest, you'd be left with $20,000 roughly after taxes being paid. So now you've got a million and 20. Whereas if you've got your cash buried somewhere in the backyard or wherever it is, you've only got $1 million. And that's not even factoring in inflation. So inflation's actually eating away at the value of that money anyway. So you're actually losing money over time. At least if it's in a savings account, you might probably at best after tax maybe keep up with inflation, depending upon what that looks like longer term. But anyway, I was having that conversation just yesterday with someone, and I thought it was worthy of mentioning, because I think a lot of people overlook the power of investing. And particularly if you've got a mortgage, you might not even use a savings account. You might use an offset account for this, because then you're going to get an even better rate of return on your money than a savings account, because you're saving interest. And a lot of banks these days do allow you to open up multiple offsets, like the bank that I'm with does. And you could then name it. You could call it like Kids Future Schooling Fund or whatever it may be, and name it correctly. So if you've got the right structures, you've got plenty of options. And then when we talk about the investment options in this space, then you start looking at investment bonds, or, I guess if you're investing longer term, you've got to consider like what's the right structure to be investing in your tax rate. So yeah, what sort of solutions and options are we looking at there? Obviously, I've mentioned the offset is pretty good for shorter term, but if we're starting to stretch the horizon out 5 and 10 years, what sort of options, and even talk about what are some of those investments even look like?
Yeah, so physical cash is the worst option. We've established that.
Yeah,
a savings account's probably the second worst option.
Yeah,
offset account is substantially better than a savings account because there's no tax. And then above that, if you've got a long time frame, you want growth. You want to achieve a return that's well above what you would earn on cash. So the stock market's the main tool there.
Yep.
ETFs, exchange traded funds, managed funds, diversified portfolio. So Aussie shares, overseas shares, some other things like infrastructure, property, just a diversified growth portfolio. So similar to what you might have in your super fund. If you got your super fund and you've got the growth or high growth option, it'll be similar to that essentially. And you're targeting a 7 to 10% return per year. Yeah. As you said, tax is important. So who owns that investment is a key part of it. So if you're in a couple, if one's high income, one's low income, you might put it in the low income person's name. Yep. If you're both high income and paying a lot of income tax, you might use an investment bond, which has a lower tax rate. And then the key thing is you're just putting money in there every single month for a long time.
Yeah.
Set and forget.
Yeah. It's pretty simple when you break it down. It's like just figure out your sort of time frame, whose name or what structure to use, and then how much. Basically, it's really, when you break it down into simple terms, that's how we look at approaching it. But a lot of people overlook it. That's the problem.
Exactly. And one more thing I'll add on this, another strategy, if you are smart enough to plan really early and you can fit it into your plan. I've had a couple of clients who bought an investment property before they had kids. And then so by the time they got to private school, they'd had that property for 10 plus years. Just sold it. Bang. All school fees covered. Sold it, cleared the debt, 500 grand sitting in an offset account. Yeah, school fees are taken care of.
I'll say a riskier one. You're betting on that one.
Risky,
but can happen. Yeah, can.
But you can do
right
both.
time
You buy a property, still try and get some money into stocks as well. Do that for 10 plus years. Then you'll probably be private school just about be covered doing that.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think, the key theme here is just like, there's a lot of different options, particularly when you're on a higher income, because in some situations, particularly if you're a business owner, you might already have a trust as well. So then you might use the trust to own some of those underlying investments, and then you can actually own, investment bonds through them. Investment bonds is worthy of talking about. They're such a flexible investment structure to use because you can actually transfer them to pretty much anyone at any point in time. And it's not a taxable event, that transfer. Whereas generally with a normal investment, not generally, this is the way it works. If you have investments in your own name and then you want to give it to your kids, like it's a taxable event. Like you can't just gift it through to them. Whereas with investment bonds, you actually can. So they're really, really flexible. And then of course you get the kicker of after 10 years time, they're entirely tax-free. You can sell it entirely tax-free. The only downside to the investment bond is because it is a tax-effective structure. It's like superannuation, and the government, doesn't want everyone getting a good leg up and getting ahead too far, and they want to get their clip along the way. So there are limits on how much you can put into an investment bond, which is what's called the 125% contribution rule, which just means in year one you can actually put as much as you want into the investment bond, but then in year 2, 3, 4, etc. thereafter, you're capped at 125% of what went in the previous year. So you put in 10K in year one, next year you can only do 12,500, and so on and so forth. So if you use an investment bond, you do have to be careful around that because you want to stay steady with your contributions. So you really want to map out and plan it out, because I've had a couple of clients that sort of kick them off. They missed a year, and then it actually, if you miss a year, you can't put 120. There's nothing for you to put in the next year because you put 0 in the year previous to that. So that means they need to start another investment bond if they want to put more money in, or if they put it back into that same investment bond, it actually restarts that 10-year tax-free period again. So you want to get some good advice around the utilization of some of those. So you plan them out and use them correctly because they can get a little complex. But trusts, possibly having bucket companies through there could be really powerful. Something that we touched on recently, because if you've got money building up in a bucket company through a family trust and it's a max tax rate of 30%, you just start maybe selling down on those investments when you need, and you could possibly be doing it in a more tax efficient manner than any other way that you could, depending upon your situation. So heaps and heaps of options, but really the key thing there is just be proactive. And what about do you ever see, I do see myself, like grandparents and things? I suppose I have some clients that are lucky enough and the grandparents are actually paying the kids' schooling. Do you see that one?
That's the next point I had. That was in that study. More than 50% of private school kids are having as grandparent help on the fees.
Huge.
So the main lesson here for anyone listening is don't compare yourself to your friends and other people, because a lot of them are not paying those fees out of their salary. They're getting help.
Yeah.
So it's just luck of the draw whether you've got grandparents who want to pay for school fees or can
see that quite often. 50% is probably more than I was expecting. Actually, that's
higher.
Yeah, high. I reckon
it's like they all buying their first house. Like how often there's external help, and people they don't want to admit, right? They want to say, I did this on my own hard work. Well, often there's help they're not telling you about.
Very true.
Which is fine. It's good to help your kids, but just means don't just avoid those comparisons, because you never know what's going on behind the scenes.
So true. And then you think about the average person who has no external help like that, and then they're seeing all of these people that you wouldn't even know, because of course not saying that, hey, the parents are paying for the kids' schooling, and then you're there just busting your ass trying to put your kids through school at the same point in time, and they're just hosing it in because they're not even having to worry about paying these expenses. So yeah, it's very much.
And then they're doing overseas trips. You're like, how could they go overseas and pay for school fees? Well, a lot of the time they're not paying the school fees.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So true. Really good point to mention. And also another point to mention with this is some of when you set up investment accounts for the kids as well, and you've got your family and kids' birthdays or Christmas and things coming up. Commonly, I do see like grandparents wanting to contribute towards the kids' investments. And so, like as an example, Leon's investment bond. There's just simple BPay details. If someone wants to contribute into it, I can just give them the details and they can put some money into his investment account for him as well. So yeah, very commonly, if you're if you are a grandparent and you got some grandkids, you might be thinking about contributing in that sort of a format because maybe you can't pay 40 or 50K to help the grandkids go through schooling. But hey, maybe you can start contributing to an investment account for them, which you just simply pay it into it, or you give it to your kids and they put it into the investment account for the grandkids. Is very very common to see. Also, grandkids, not grandkids, the grandparents will be investing for the grandkids. Have you helped any clients out over the years with some of that, Billy?
Yes, I have the same thing with grandparents helping out. I'm just putting into the calculator right now. So even if the grandparents, let's say they're throwing $2,000 a year, right? $2,000 a year. They do that for 15 years. That's $60,000.
Yeah,
That's a couple of years of fees covered.
yeah, yeah.
So any grandparents out there are thinking, I can't afford to bloody pay this even a little bit. If it goes into that long-term pool of money, it can be really valuable.
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, I think that's a really good one to note because some of these investment products are really, really flexible from that perspective. And then in closing, Billy, the fair way to balance school fees, with the super and in a mortgage, because the average person, let's just say, is not being, oh, well, actually, that's maybe not true. I was going to say the average person's not being helped out by their grandparents, but maybe they are. So let's just assume not that situation, but, you're looking down the barrel of paying all of these school fees yourself. You've got a mortgage, you've got some super, you're probably in your 40s somewhere, or maybe you're in your late 30s, and then you're like, okay, I've got a mortgage here of well over 6, 7, 800,000, maybe plus. I've got super's looking average. Got maybe a little bit of investments here, but I haven't pushed too hard. We're earning okay as a household, but yeah, where to start? Because it's like, well, do I then neglect my super? Do I have to wait 30 years and pay off my mortgage? Got the kids' school fees at my my heels here, and I'm thinking about it. How would you go about setting priorities or building a plan? Because that's what it looks like for most clients. Like they've got all these competing priorities, and it goes to the point earlier that I was saying around, what would you prefer of that? You're going to possibly be giving up that. It's that opportunity cost and trade off. We talk about it so much with our clients. So you do this, you might be foregoing that. And for a lot of people, if they push their kids through these expensive schools, and they're paying it themselves, they might be foregoing, a lot of other lifestyle opportunity, happiness, fulfillment, and so on. So, in closing, Billy, how would you approach that with those competing priorities?
Yeah, I mean, it's just communication with your partner, figuring out between you what's important, and mapping out what will life look like after the kids finish school. It's obviously hard to know how you're going to feel in 10 years or 15 years' time. But one thing we do know is if the only priority is school fees, and then your kids finish school and you don't own a house, you have bugger all assets, you haven't put anything extra into super, to start to be in that place at 50 something years old, it's not ideal. So yeah, school fees are not the most important thing in the world. And when your kids are grown up, they will not feel good about the fact that you did that you put yourself under that amount of financial stress just to send them to the fancy school.
And you see so many people do it. It's such a weird one when you think about it, because you see so much of that. And it'd be good to sort of ask some of the people that have done that, if they would do their time over again, would they do it? Would they still do it in the same way and make that massive sacrifice? Because it's a sacrifice really on all fronts, their financial future, lifestyle, and everything there and in between. But I suppose they're doing it all for their kids. And I probably a lot of those people as well, is part of why they do it is, because they don't want their kids maybe to grow up in the way that they did. So they really do sacrifice themselves for the kids' betterment. But is that the best way to set your kids up? I don't know.
Yeah, not necessarily. And I mean, I know because most of my sort of group of friends all went to private schools, and they just had parent guilt, right? They're like, I got to go to a nice school, so my kids need to go to a nice even if it's going to financially cripple the household.
Yeah. Probably a deeper topic that we could delve into with amongst all of that and the psychology around all of it, because it's an interesting one, and it really affects a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And even, people aren't earning a great deal of money, but, have got to send their kids to, decent schools or want to be able to do it. It doesn't have to be a big fancy private school paying $50K plus per year. For some people, $10,000 or $15,000 a year might be a fair bit of money.
There's nice Catholic schools that are 10, 15K, so you don't have to go to the full most elite school you can find. There's plenty of good schools out there.
Yep. No, good topic, Billy. Have we missed any? I've got no other notes. I think we've covered off everything there. Any other final points or anything that we haven't touched on?
No, I think we're well covered, but I do want to go back to this consultant and have a chat. I reckon he might have some interesting contributions on this topic, so maybe we'll try and bring him in the future.
Could be a future podcast guest, I think, because there'd have to be some good war stories in there somewhere as well around some, securing some people. And he'd probably get, I would guess there'd be some decent money thrown at him to push kids up the line. And, what is it? Tell me what it's going to take to.
It's got to be a murky world. It's got to be
probably
there. Yeah.
It probably does. It probably does get a bit murky. I don't know what the compliance is like in that, but probably a bit different to us. Not as strict, I would say. A little bit loose, but no, good conversation, good topic, I think, Billy. So hopefully everyone listening, you get a fair bit out of what we have spoken about. And of course, if you're in this sort of situation and you're wanting to plan it all out, if you can't plan it for yourself, this is like right up the alley of what a good financial advisor does. So you can always come through to any of the advisors at the business or seek out your own financial advisor. And I suppose the key theme is really the sooner you can get started, the better off you are going to be, but then also your kids are going to be into the future. So we might wrap it up there, Billy. Enjoy the weekend, mate, and look forward to catching up with you next week.
Same to you. Thanks, Josh.
Disclaimer. The information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. Please head to the show notes if you wish to book in a free 15-minute call to discuss your personal situation.